I was at a stage where I was doing so much writing. I was entering so many different writing competitions and submitting to so many literary magazines and literary journals. And there's so much fail, so much rejection. I wasn't actually able to publish it or share it. And it was very suffocating. And I don't think I realized how suffocating it was until I started doing the by Saraid Taylor All the Best newsletter Substack, where I could share it with an audience and actually have it alive as opposed to it just stored in my body. Like when I say suffocating, it was heavy. It was just sitting in me as opposed to ever seeing any kind of daylight.
There's so many things. There's so many buttons. There's so many, like turn this on, turn that off. And then, if anything was just one little button wasn't pressed, it could just like the whole house of cards just falls apart.
Oh gosh. I feel like that's a really interesting conversation because because I'm not to the same extent with all the equipment, but still in terms of like multifaceted creatives. So there's potentially one aspect, like you might enjoy all of the aspects, but there is so many aspects that you have to be good at and to do, like the marketing, the actual creation of it, all of it, the planning.
I don't know whether it's necessarily being good at it because you kind of, it's all essential.
Yeah.
And you're just learning as you go. Like everything that I'm doing, I'm completely unfamiliar with. And I actually don't even know what I'm doing. I really don't.
Really?
Like, I mean, I didn't know how to record until I decided to do this. I'd never edited a video.
I would never have known. Did you study graphic design?
I did, but that doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't really
doesn't
count.
mean anything. It doesn't count. Like the best advice I would give to anyone that wants to get into any creative field is to just do it. Absolutely jump in.
Yeah.
Don't worry about any kind of formal education. It is not going to help you. The things that you need to know, they don't teach.
Yeah. Isn't it so funny? Why is that? Is it a conspiracy? I know how you love conspiracies.
No, I don't know. I just think that why is that?
It doesn't make sense, does it?
No. And it's the higher level of education, the less they teach you about the shit you need to know. You know, for something like creative pursuits, I think taking short courses in trades that are specific to certain components of what you need to know, like they don't teach you how to operate the business side of things at all, which is about 80% of what you're doing, and the 20% is the actual work part.
Yeah.
Did you? Wait, you did. You went to VCA, didn't you?
Yeah, so I studied screenwriting, and I felt like that really helped me. So I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was pretty balanced in terms of trying to be really industry specific and networking and making contacts, etc., as much as you can for little punk students to run around and try and talk to professional people and like actually build meaningful connections as opposed to just annoy the bejeebers out of them.
So because you did screenwriting, right?
I did screenwriting, yes.
Does what you learned in that, does that permeate into other forms of writing and other writing disciplines?
Absolutely. Because I've always wanted to be an author. I've always loved writing. Since the age of 8, I was like, I want to be an author every year. For some strange reason, I want to be an author. My little New Year's resolution. But in terms of actually being able to write, I think I always got a lot of credit as a kid coming through school as somebody who was relatively smart. The teachers thought, like, good writer. Like, it was very prosy, I would say. Like, big words, quite pretty to read. But I got to university and it was the best thing I did going to VCA because screenwriting is all about the absolute grit of a story. Like it's about the mechanics. Like what is the motor of this story? You cannot hide behind pretty words. And all of a sudden I got there and I remember it's a select entry program. So it means they only take about 20 kids for the class, for the screenwriting class, 20 for directing, 20 for acting in any given year. So there was a written component and then that got shortened down and then you did, I think, another maybe writing component and then you had to come in for an interview. So it was like these certain steps that each phase. And I got waitlisted, so I didn't get straight in. But it makes sense that I got waitlisted because I came in for the interview and you had to prepare 2 pitches, essentially, to stories that you would potentially make a screenplay out of. And as I was explaining, it was 2 stories that I'd written. The lecturers / interviewers, they went on to be my lecturers, but at the time the interviewers were like, where is the story here? And I was like, I think if you could just read it, then you'd understand. They're like, no, we're not reading it. Tell us what the story is. And it was in that moment I realized I did not have any story, and I wasn't actually sure if I knew how to write a story, but it was there. The impulse to create and to write was in me. And then I feel like VCA actually really helped me, equip me with those tools.
Just draw it out of you.
Draw it out and actually find the structure of a story, like what actually is a story as opposed to what's all of the nice flowery parts that read well. So that's sort of I've always been okay at, but to be able to take that and then combine it with a bit of verve, a bit of power was a relief.
So then it just made you, transformed you from being a writer to a storyteller, essentially.
It really did. Yeah.
Then what's the guts? What's at the guts of a good story from a writer's point of view?
Oh, that's a big question, Wayne. What's the guts of a story? I think most people would say conflict, like tension. It's interesting because I've had conflict with conflict, like the idea of conflict and how we're taught, or the idea of tension. Because often people think of conflict and you think a movie, like a blockbuster movie, where everyone's sparring with each other, there's guns, there's lots of blood, there's lots of tears. I think that conflict, like the beauty of it is it can operate on so many different levels, from like a really, really big, ghastly scene to something that's quite minute.
And you're just layering them as well.
But there's still so much power in something, a small event or scene. Like we could sit here between us and have a huge emotional conflict in the most subtle of ways. And if that is articulated well enough, the audience will feel something. That expansion of what a conflict means, I think, is what is really cool about storytelling.
Yeah, I asked because I had James Rush on, and he is really good at conveying a story in film form.
Yes.
Adam was also another one that was excellent at that.
Yeah.
They are able to layer in a lot of emotion in really subtle forms. Like I as an observer, I can look at a piece of film, even in a short form, and understand the emotion they're trying to communicate with very little resources on hand. With books, there's so much, or in writing rather, there's so much that you have to put in to establish that same level, right? So it feels as though that you have to put in more to form something really subtle.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why it was really, I felt very lucky to go to VCA and study screenwriting, because it was equipping me with sort of both extremes, like novel writing or books or prose writing. There's a lot of context and it's a lot longer. Even in a short story, there's a lot more words. Whereas screenplays, if you look at them, they're sparse, like they're succinct. Yeah, they're tight, and they're really, really tight in a different way. Novel writing's still tight in certain ways, but it is different. That gets 2 sort of extremes of creating the written word. And that's why I think maybe I should clarify, because I think for fiction writing, often, or like screenplays, anyone would say, oh, the guts of a story is conflict or it's tension. But then overarching, which is what James Rush does as well, and when it's more like narrative non-fiction or that sort of form, I think it is more emotion. Like emotion is the guts of it. And then I guess if you distill then fiction, the guts then is emotion as well. Like you can simplify it to that.
And then bring in an element of resolution to kind of just to settle that conflict.
Yeah.
So it's just that really typical, that like, the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Or anything to kind of like, I guess, to elicit some unease, and then to put the audience at ease after that.
Yeah, to make them feel something.
Yeah.
Like unease in whichever way unease is going to come out in that situation, whether it's grief or whether it is anger or indignation, like that kind of really sharp, evocative sensation. I also think contrast often is the key. Like you're from where you started to where you end in whatever artistic form you're experiencing. That's usually where that story kind of unfolds. And sometimes it's completely different, or other times it's like quite cyclical, like it's circular and you almost end up in a similar spot, but you're supposed to, as an audience, have learned something or felt something different. Yeah.
That's something that we practice in branding as well, right?
Is
like
it? Yeah.
It is the hero's journey, right? Like we just as people, as you know, individuals in cultures and societies, that we really resonate with stories.
Yeah.
That's the best way for us to learn as well, just to understand from an individual's point of view the journey that they went through to overcome certain obstacles or to have grown and developed. So in branding, we try to convey or reach a particular audience, and they're looking for transformation, right? So they're looking at moving from a negative state to a positive state, and a negative emotion to a positive emotion. Everything that we do is always going to be emotionally driven.
Yeah.
So we can then look at what is the negative state that they're currently in, and then what does your brand provide to them to help take them from that state to the next state. So, you know, we can then take them across that particular, that hero's journey, break it up into different steps, and show the audience little glimpses of where they're at and where they can be. But yeah, no, we do connect with stories. We do connect with that overarching kind of transformative state from this emotion to that emotion. And it just comes down to how you tell it and what's your medium of choice.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's so cool because it's just different scales. Like if you look at it, if you think of like novel writing as this really big, like you have a lot of words and it's quite expansive, and then screenplays, or when you're writing for plays, like it's a bit tight, like it's smaller, and then branding is distilled even more. Like it's cool. It's just like that. I'm like, I think branding is a very, very difficult job because you do not have as much time or space to really immediately communicate those feelings. Like it's sharp.
It is,
but talented people.
Yes and no. Like branding takes time.
Yeah.
Kind of like how if you're going to start developing trust in a person, right? Like it's going to take more than one touch point for you to understand who they are, their motives, their values, and much like with a brand, like one particular touch point is not going to convey enough.
Yeah.
You know how you were saying that with screenwriting that is really succinct, that it's just point.
Yes.
Is that done in that way intentionally to then leave the room for interpretation for the other creative people to then translate what it is that you're doing and then putting it back out there?
Interesting. I think a large part is screenwriting is so collaborative, and it's funny as a writer because there's not as much autonomy unless you're going to go then direct it, produce it, find the actors yourself. A lot of it you just have to surrender to the next person in the chain. There's a lot of visions that go into one movie, say. Like there's been a lot of people putting their own flavor, their own lens on it. Like that is part of the biggest challenge, conveying your ideas through that screenplay as succinctly but as sternly as you can. So your vision and what you're imagining for the piece, the director, whoever's writing it and is then going to make it happen, is on the same page.
I guess that'll be the benefit. If you're going to direct it, you can screenwrite it in a way that you will understand and how that translates as well.
Yes. Yeah. But often screenwriters, especially in Australia, well, they're often not the directors as well. So it's often quite like strictly separated roles. So yeah, if you're a screenwriter, you're deferring, you're giving your piece away and giving it new life in a different way.
You have any ambitions of pursuing that part of your creative writing?
Definitely. Like, I love it. And I think that's what, like, Saraid, just slow down, like, settle down. Do one thing and do it well, as opposed to just wanting to do it all. But I loved screenwriting, and I loved the visual form. Like, I love being behind the camera and in front of it and holding it, like, all of that sort of stuff. So definitely I would love to write for, like, television or film, but also I'm interested in producing and and acting. All of those different forms, I just think are so cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
It's a multifaceted creative outlet where you're able to then put things into words, put things into picture, incorporating sound engineering into all that.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be on this side of the camera as well, then you could be the one to actually like live out that creation.
Absolutely. And I think the level of collaboration that comes from something like movie making or television making is so immense and so powerful. There's just so many people that have to do their job really well for the piece to work. Let it like happen, but let alone like actually work. And I think that's something that I crave. Novel writing or writing essays or articles, which is what I'm currently doing, is a lot more solitary. And I do yearn for more, like, as much that collaborative nature, getting to work with other creatives.
That's interesting. I hadn't given it much thought. I've got a filmmaker coming on next week
Oh,
as well.
yeah.
And it was just one of those things where like it's so immense making a film. I don't even know what goes into it at all, but I just know that there's this, you see the credits and you're like, okay, that person has just done this little tiny minuscule role that has a massive impact. So no, it's good that, you've kind of warmed me up to things like actually there's a lot involved.
So much.
Because right now you're focusing on, your writing is being channeled through your Substack by Saraid Taylor.
Yeah.
What's the motivation or the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because as much as I say I really miss the collaboration of working with creatives and other people, like artists, the real plus side to writing yourself and then also being able to publish it or produce it yourself is there a certain level of autonomy that you can, and it's cheap. Like, I'm just using my own time, which is not necessarily cheap, but in the sense of how much everything else costs, it's cheap. Like, I don't have to pay other people and I don't have to use up lots of their time. So that was probably a really big impetus. Was I was at a stage where I was doing so much writing. I was entering so many different writing competitions and submitting to so many literary magazines and literary journals and mentorships and residencies and scholarships, etc. And there's so much failure, like that's inherent in any artistic practice. So much failure, so much rejection. I wasn't actually able to produce anything, like not produce in the sense I was producing it, but actually publish it or share it. And it was very suffocating. And I don't think I realized how suffocating it was until I started doing the by Saraid Taylor All the Best newsletter Substack, where I could share it with an audience and actually have it alive as opposed to it just stored in my body. Like when I say suffocating, it was heavy because it felt like all of these different short story pieces or essays or whatever form it was, novel piece, chapters, it was just sitting in me as opposed to ever seeing any kind of daylight.
So it's just an outlet. So it is just part of the point of it is a channel and avenue just to write without any intention.
Yeah, well, I think so. I have an audience on social media, a pretty small audience, but still an audience, and I wasn't engaging with them in any way. I wasn't really giving them anything. I was doing all this work, but then never sharing it and then never able to connect. So the Substack is definitely an outlet, but it's also a way to try and connect with other people a little bit more and more consistently, because I don't feel like, because I've signed a novel contract and I signed that in halfway through 2022, and I haven't finished the novel yet, like the novel's not out on shelves, that takes up so much time, but there is no way for it to actually be physicalized yet. So we were speaking before we started shooting about like, do we talk about the novel? We sure can, but everyone asked me about the novel, and it's very hard to, like, it's quite tiring because I don't have anything to show for it. There's only a certain amount I can talk about, but it's obviously everyone's level of interest, as opposed to here's something I can actually give you right now that reflects what I'm currently working on, or reflects any talent I have in writing. Like, you can actually experience it, as opposed to me have to interpret that experience, hypothetical experience, for you.
It's just the active work that you're doing to then continue doing the work as a writer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Your audience that you touched on, what do you think is the percentage of that following that knows you as an athlete versus knowing you as a creative writer?
Oh, it's a hard breakdown. I've had, so are you talking about my Instagram?
Well, yeah.
Or pretty much any.
Yeah. We'll say your social media following.
Social media following. Well, Instagram primarily, I would say neither. Like, I've had that Instagram account since I was 15. Actually, even earlier, I think it started as a photography account, and then it became a meme account, and then it went back to a photography account, and then it found more of an identity in community justice, social justice posts. Because I've always, when we talk about like what is the meaning behind like the by Saraid Taylor Substack, it is about community. Like, fundamentally, it comes down to empathy and education and wanting to grow. Like, me wanting to grow, also wanting to grow, like others to grow, and us all to grow together, like a big fun garden. The Instagram account was a way to build a platform that aligned with my values. So from a very ridiculously young age, because I had adults essentially asking me for advice, and I was like, I am not qualified in any way, but what I will do is I will listen to as many people as I can, and I will try and share those perspectives. I never want to talk over anybody, but I would love to help advocate. Like, it's always been about building enough of a platform that I can then have enough privilege to be building other people's platforms, if that makes sense, or at least like give some bricks to theirs, like be able to. So in terms of the breakdown of what my social media is, it's definitely changed, I think, composition more recently towards more athlete, more rider. But I would still say a big core of that comes from those early years where all I was posting about was either like puns, really silly, dorky puns. And
they still pop up every once in a while.
They still come through. Or, social media stuff, social justice issues, like activism.
Do you find that because there is so much focus on that you may become too synonymous with that, rather than it just being like, hey, look, I think we should just discuss this, or it needs to be brought, some attention needs to be put on this?
I have found so much tension in trying to establish for myself what my brand is and like what my virtual identity is, because the foundation of those social media accounts is built on social justice / activism. It then seems really silly for me to like post a photo of myself, as opposed to being not a celeb, like a sort of a celebrity or a professional athlete or a social influencer, etc., who has their own identity, and that's there. And then they also might post about certain social issues. I find that I don't post at all because it feels incongruent, like immoral almost to my audience to post about myself when there's so much suffering currently going on in the world, and there's so many issues currently happening. Like me saying, oh, here's a day in my little life, when my last post was about the genocide unfolding in Gaza. Like, that is a very difficult kind of balance to strike, and it's a position of privilege obviously to be in it, and it's just an interesting commentary on how we navigate the social world when there's so many. You're scrolling through a meme and a pun, and the next thing you know, it's people really, really in a lot of pain.
Earlier we were talking about how like we are multifaceted people, and there are certain things that that you feel compelled to share.
Yeah.
Then there's also other components of you that that's worthy to be put out there. You know, as someone who has a public profile, is there much trepidation because of any like pushback?
I think it's less trepidation about pushback externally and more about my own expectations on myself. Because when you talk about multifaceted, there's obviously different things that I'm interested in and also different sort of versions, for want of a better word, of myself. There's me as a person who plays sport, a person who writes / creates, a person who is interested in the wider community, trying to balance all three of those things. They're pillars of me that I find equally important. Like all three are important. So the tension of having my brand equally represent them, like simultaneously, I find tough. I find that really tricky. And so I think I procrastinate then posting. Like the trepidation then comes from me thinking I actually need to be really organized and make sure this post follows this post, that follows this post, but also isn't so incongruent or like starkly different that it's jarring for my audience. Like I still want it to be smooth. It's all that sort of random, potentially superfluous thoughts that go through my mind as opposed to just do it. And if it's okay, it's okay. It doesn't have to be really, really good all the time.
I think just do it.
I agree, Wayne. Come on, brain.
I'm no good, and as you know, we were saying earlier, I don't know how any of this operates.
Yes.
I feel as though that we rely too much on results as a driving factor for how we operate. I feel as though that we tend to overthink a lot of things, and because I know for me personally, I put a lot of my happiness, once upon a time, put a lot of my happiness on what I thought the result was going to be. And it was largely going to be some kind of external feedback. Yeah. And when it never really aligned with my expectations, then it was just deflating. Rather than just doing things and just being content and happy with the doing of the thing rather than attaching a result to validate what that thing was. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and it definitely does.
Like it's perfectly fine for us to have a bunch of different interests, and it's some of them might not entirely make sense, right? Like I don't know how many people would be as creative as you while still having an opportunity to play professional sport, while still being so aware of a lot of the social issues and wanting to put that in the forefront. There's really not that many people like that, right? So I don't think it's necessarily like it's fine to be all those things at the one time.
Yeah, I know, and that's why it's so, and I find it like frustrating about myself, but also I understand why, because it does feel quite tiring trying to present it all simultaneously, as opposed to take a bit of the pressure off and just let, on any given day, a bit more of it flow. Like I feel like my productivity would probably be a bit higher.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
If the expectation, if I wasn't as strict on myself about a detail that people who are scrolling through their Instagram and are probably at best going to look at my post for half a second do not care about, will not notice, and if they do notice, will not care about.
Yeah, and I just tie it back to you being your number one supporter and you being the biggest fan of yourself. Imagine that if the things that you create, and in this particular instance, you know, we're talking about like social media, right? If you had one follower and that was you, right? What would you put out there? Like with this podcast, early on, you know, when I was sending it out and I was just go to friends to have a listen and give us feedback. And I was really open to it. And a lot of people, they're not so inclined to give negative feedback, but I wanted to hear it. Right? I needed to hear it. So some of the feedback that I got was more like, don't agree. And that was it. It's like, I hear what you're saying.
I do not agree.
Yeah, it's like, no, I don't agree. I don't agree. Like, I get that, but I guess this is just not for you. Right. So with this podcast, it's more like, do I want to hear it? Is this person someone who I think I want to sit across from and pick their brain and to learn something from? It's just not going to necessarily be for everyone, but it's just in this particular moment, this is what I want to do. I'm trying my best to not seek external validation because that'll start to push the creativity in a way that might not really resonate with me.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, it's such a beautiful stage right now for you without really, really strong external pressures to be true to what your vision is for the podcast.
Yeah.
With that said, it's still very successful. Like, it's still, like, from what I can see, a lot of engagement and a lot of positive feedback, but it's coming from a level of integrity about what the work you want to put out there.
Yep, exactly. And then that's how you start drawing the people that you can align with as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
If you can just start working from a place of authenticity and just being genuine with yourself, then the rest will just follow. I think so anyway. I mean, yet to be seen. Yeah.
No, I think so too, because you essentially are building the community yourself. Like, you're drawing in the people who are interested in what you're creating, what you would watch, and therefore also what they would watch, as opposed to trying to fit or find some way for you to be palatable, fit somebody else.
And then you just dilute you dilute the work that you're creating.
Absolutely.
And then effectively, if what you're doing is then it's meant to be a representation, or if I'm meant to align with my work, if my work becomes diluted, and then what does that say about me? Like, what am I losing here?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and then how does that then alter the work? And, you know, if you're speaking to everybody, then you're speaking to no one.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So yeah, your book.
Yes.
Your book. The book
Yes.
that you're writing that you get asked a lot about but don't have no answers for.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about.
Mysterious book.
Yeah. I want to hear about this because
Yes.
I think that it's going to be topical because it's going to come out in a time that's really going to resonate with where we are culturally. But let's start with that. Tell us a bit about this book.
Yeah.
What is the book about? And I want to better understand how it has come from a personal experience and how you're injecting yourself into this.
Okay. What is the book about? So that is why I probably struggle the most with conversations about the book, because people ask me. Obviously, I know what the book is about, but it's hard to sort of encapsulate it quickly. Lucky we have so much time, right?
What's your elevator pitch?
Yeah, people are like, well, give me the elevator pitch. I'm like, guys, do you know how stressful and scary elevator pitches are? And also, it's pitched. It's already been taken. I don't need to. But the elevator pitch, or at least how I would describe it, is it's often just in lots of words. Because it's literary fiction, it's not commercial fiction, which is usually genre. So it's not mystery or horror or romance. Like, it's not strictly categorized by genre. Literary fiction is a little bit more exploration of ideas and themes. So the themes and ideas that I'm exploring, it's like family, love, identity, empathy, forgiveness, guilt, like those kind of I'm trying to find a synonym for themes, but we'll use themes again. Those kind of themes are something I'm really, really interested in, and how they sort of interact with each other and collide a lot of times. But the book itself, in terms of like the plot, which again isn't a traditional structure, like it's not when you watch a third act Hollywood movie and, you know, this happens, inciting incident and this and this and this. It's not as strict as that. It is more of a navigation of those kind of themes that I was saying earlier.
I guess it kind of has to be that way. If it's going to be a book about self-discovery,
yes,
that's what I'm gathering, about relationships and how you grow and evolve through that kind of discovery, then that would feel like that is the plot, like of just being an empty vessel, then finding its fill along the way.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think there's a lot in terms of novels. There's a genre which is young adult fiction, which has taken a lot of popularity in the last maybe decade, 2 decades, which didn't really exist beforehand because teenagers weren't perceived, or young adults weren't perceived as a market. Now they are. Now we know how much money, people know how much money they can make of young people. So that's a very firm genre. Young adult is usually what? Anywhere from like 13 to 18 is like something like that, right? New young adult is probably where my novel fits in, because it's still a young adult, like it's still 18, 19, 20, but it's not the level of thirst that are often associated with that initial genre. So it's more like first time driving or first time flying alone. Like those kind of things I'm really not necessarily seeing as represented in the literary world. And that's why when I was writing this novel, I was like, I think there's a lot to say about when you're in your really early 20s or when you're just past teenagehood. What are those kind of moments of really acute discoveries and firsts that don't always get shown in other forms of media?
And it's something that's not really discussed much about either. We kind of just float through that because you're in it now.
I am, yeah.
My 20s was such a blur.
Yeah.
And I think for anybody that gets to late 30s and 40s, they'll look back and be like, holy shit, it really was.
Yeah.
It was so much happening all at once, very jarring. A lot of massive changes are happening. Some going to uni, some not, but it's the point where real life really hits you.
Yeah.
There's no real there's no book that tells you how to do it. There you go.
Yeah.
No, there's no guide. There's no
Yeah.
how-to guide with how you're meant to navigate it, and it's not as simple as then taking advice from those before you, because so much has changed as well. But in saying that, there has to be, in its essence, at the essence, there has to be a sameness for everyone that has gone through their 20s or those formative years, that it's not about the experiences, all the different experiences, but it's about how you carry yourself through those.
Oh, that's art, right? Like the sense, like capturing of universal experiences, not through what the specifics, like the mechanisms actually are, but what the feelings are elicited. Like the first, like all of the sense of excitement, the sense of thrill or fear or love, like all of those kind of emotions that people can relate to without necessarily having to go through them specifically. I think that, and so the novel is set in the world of professional basketball. As much as not everyone can relate to being 18 or 19 like the protagonist in the professional basketball landscape, hopefully the stuff that I'm writing, like those kind of events and those kind of feelings that are evoked, is that the right word? Those feelings are something people can relate to, can experience.
And you're drawing from your own personal experience, eh?
People love to ask me that too. It's fiction, so non-fiction is if it was actually about me. Fiction is when it's fictitious. There's still elements of my friends' experiences, of my experiences naturally that I draw on, because it's such a lush field. Like there's so much in professional sport that translates so beautifully to artistic expression, and I don't think it's been done enough. So there's definitely like carryover there. But it's not like I'm writing an autobiography. Like that, it's still a creative expression. Like the story is still fictional. Yeah.
And to what I was alluding to earlier on about how when this book comes out, it's going to be at a time where it is going to resonate, because women's professional sports now, it's at this tipping point and it's about to really take off. Like we've seen how WNBA this year has just, it's unprecedented, the level of attention it has. That's come from a lot of years and years and years of push. Right?
So much push.
And now it's getting the rallying behind it. You know, it has massive support from like the NBA, right? Like it's almost the way the relationship they're trying to form is that it's synonymous. Yeah. Like you get one and you get the other.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So good. And it's funny because a lot of people are using the word unprecedented in terms of like women's sport currently. I think a lot of people would say it is very precedented. Like as you say a lot of people have previously really pushed and worked hard to get to the position we're currently in, they would all say it's precedent. Like, we knew that if anyone just invested a little bit of time and money into women's sport, we could flourish. I think we're finally seeing a bit of the benefits from that. And it's very hard to compare numbers. A lot of commenters on social media, if you look at any posts on women's sport, love to get into the comments and talk about revenue and the same number of people watching, all of those kind of numbers. It's very hard to fairly measure or like compare numbers when there's not the same level of not just investment, but like opportunity, and not just opportunity, but lack of barriers. Like, sorry, that's a very convoluted way of saying women's sport has not just been not invested in, it's been actively held back. Like, if you look at certain moments through history, women A weren't allowed to play sport, like they were banned from playing sport, and B certainly were not allowed to play professionally, and C not get paid for or have any of those kind of benefits. I constantly cite this article and I always forget all of the important dates. So I bring it up as an example and then I'm like, I'm going to have to go get my phone and show you. But there was, in whatever year it was, women's soccer in England. Have you heard this story?
No, go on.
Women's soccer in England, I think it was like 51,000 people, maybe 56,000, something. A huge number of people came to a women's soccer game. And throughout the season, they just had all of this rising interest. It was post-World War II, so women had been in jobs that they previously hadn't been allowed to while the men were at war, and had come back, pushed the women out of the jobs, but the women were still allowed to play soccer. The women's soccer was really, really popular, and then women's soccer got banned, and it would stay banned for, don't hold me to these numbers, but like 81 years. That is such a perfect example of women's sport not being like, everyone goes, oh yes, there's not the same level of like investment, or it's not as popular because like it doesn't have as much money. It's like, no, it actually has been actively designed that women weren't allowed to play sport, and like there was reasons for that. It was described as unladylike. It was described as immoral. Like, these are the kind of things that in 2024, women who play sport, or people like, we're still, let me say that sentence again. In 2024, women who play sport are still up against the repercussions of all of those decisions made throughout history. It's not something that's just happened accidentally.
Yeah, no, not accidentally, but I believe everything affects everything.
Yes.
There's you can't look at one particular topic and say that, well, this is because of this. I think that there is so many things at play.
Absolutely.
And, you know, when we're looking at sport specifically, how it fits into the cultural paradigm and what it means. Like, if you want to take sport all the way back to, like, let's say, you know, the Olympics, right, where it was a form of trying to find, I guess, the alpha, whatever it may be, right? Like, it's just a show of dominance.
Yeah.
And it was there to be exclusively for men. And then now we fast forward to 2024 and we can see that there is some commercial viability, right? And that's when the ears prick up. But then, I mean, that's the thing that's going to drive so much, right? Like, there has to be some recognition of, like, why, other than the fact that, like, we're just creating an avenue for, I don't even want to say for women, because there's just been a whole bunch of other people that have been oppressed and just been excluded from participating in, whether it be sports, politics, just kept out.
Yes.
But then as things evolve, they will start to bring a lot of that in. But I feel as though that it comes from just the changing of the times. When this little thing changes, it affects this, and it all kind of comes together, and it just coalesces at this particular point in time. And it's now like, this is now the moment that it needs to, that the platform is created. Like, all that hardship had to happen. It had to happen, and you had to bang your head up against the wall. Like if for something to have any kind of importance or significance, you have to really push for it. You know, you could look at it at a macro scale like women's sport, or even like on a micro scale down to the individual. Like, how much do you want it?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's a good point.
Yeah. So now you have the WNBL possibly being, sold off to some major players that I would say are really gonna launch this into a whole new stratosphere. And it's just what a WNBL, how many years? 30 something years?
I think over 40.
Over 40 now?
Yeah.
Over 40 years of grinding, hardship, grinding.
Yeah.
And then now it's just like this is the moment. This is the time now.
So there's an article that I'm releasing this week sometime about the WNBL and about the numbers and the pathways leading into WNBL, because it's really interesting to think about how much of a pioneer the WNBL has been as the first professional women's sport in this country, in Australia. Before, I'm not even sure if you measured it globally where it stands, but it was before a league like the WNBA, for example. So a real pioneer. Because we have seen so much shift in the last couple of years, it is such an exciting time that Basketball Australia is re-evaluating its relationship / ownership of the WNBL, and the WNBL might step into a period of immense growth, or at least change and working it out. A massive part, I think, of that journey for it is to understand its own identity and who it wants to be. I wrote in that article, there's no longer any capital, or there's no longer any distinction for it to just be a women's sport, because there's other women's sports now. There's other professional sporting leagues who are also women's sport, and they have their own categorization. They have their own characterization is the word I was trying to say. They have their own characterization, meaning they know what their image is, they know what their brand is, they know who they're appealing to. It's all very specific and deliberate. Whereas I think because the WNBL was such a pioneer, it probably still relies on that identity, as opposed to growing with the times and adapting to other threats, which are sporting codes. They're threats and they're also allies. They need to be perceived as both of those things, embraced as both.
Yeah, it has to grow and move with the changing of the tide.
Yeah.
And it had the opportunity to be the first mover. And I feel as though that basketball it's a sport that it sells itself, right? It's very easy to fall into it and to fall in love with it.
Yeah.
It's something that is you just need a ball and you can play by yourself, right? So it's easy to get into it, and then the community that's around it is embracing, and is very different here in Australia compared to every country has its own unique identity with how it plays the sport. And I feel as though that here in Australia, it lacks an identity, because so much of it is borrowed from other countries, especially in America, where even though it's the HQ of basketball, but you look at how the Europeans play, it's very different to how the Americans play. And I think that once the WNBL, or women's basketball here in Australia, is given the freedom and the luxury to grow and develop, it's really going to help cultivate its own identity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so exciting. I'm so excited for the athletes, because I think, again, so many, pretty much all of them, have been such pioneers, from the ones currently playing, of course, the ones who played from the beginning and all the way through the various decades. Female athletes who have not received anywhere near enough recognition, because you're looking at other sports and it is incredible and it's so well deserved. Athletes who are now in mainstream media and who are in sort of mainstream consciousness. There is awareness around them. I feel like the WNBL, to a certain extent, the players themselves have been really left behind or done a disservice because they are so talented as athletes, like as sports people, but then also some of the most charismatic, like generous, fun people. They would make good celebrities. Like Australia's missing out on knowing WNBL players.
There are a lot of like the personalities in there that are very relatable. Will be someone's sister, someone's mom,
Yeah.
right? Right? Like
Yeah,
even
sister-in-law, like partner, there's so many different.
yeah, very relatable characters. And with Adam McKay and the work that he was doing, because I think he'd be really proud to see whether this is going to go. You know, like he was someone that was, he was an advocate and he really pushed it.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, he would be pretty happy to then have this sense of like, it's happening.
Yeah.
Right? The underdog's coming up now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the part that Adam played can't be understated. The fact Adam spent so much time in the WBL at the Melbourne Boomers and gave so much of his energy, so much of his love and vision, helped exponentially.
Yeah.
Like the visibility of women's basketball has Adam really to thank to a certain extent.
And there are a lot of creative people out there with you know, when I say creative people, I think that they have their specific medium where they bring in their passion of basketball and use their skills and to put it on this pedestal. So I've spoke with Kevin Gold, Oh No's. Are you familiar with his work?
No.
He's an artist that you would have come across his work. You would for sure. He actually worked with the Melbourne Boomers as well. He did this massive mural, worked with Adam. They were pretty tight. And, you know, he was just one example of a creative person that loves basketball and just wants to see it grow, and then used that passion and mixed it with his passion of art, brought them together and had something that's coalesced and just creates work that's primarily basketball related. There are so many people out there that are doing that. And, you know, we touched on earlier about Summer Jams, how it was about basketball, but it's not really about basketball. It's about the community. It's about the people. It's about the culture that surrounds it. And that's one of the beauties that basketball has, is how much it has permeated into society and how much influence it's got its fingerprints on everything. That's, you know, fashion, music. For you, it will be your literature, paintings, design. It has not just influenced those creative outlets, but all of those creative outlets have then also kind of got their fingerprints all over other sports.
Yeah.
So it started off as a sport of 5 or 10 people putting a ball in a ring, and has just kind of had this ripple effect. And now it's all coming back.
Yeah.
And now it's all coming back. And how it's influenced society, it's all coming back to the sport, and it's now just going to be pushing it and elevating it to another level by expanding its the player base. With your writing, do you do a brain dump and then edit, or do you already go in with a bit of a structure and understanding this is actually what I want to write, and try to get it as concise as you can the first time around?
It varies. I think I probably lean towards the first one more, in the sense of I write a little bit, it's like unorthodox in the sense of I will have this kind of little seed of an idea, and I'll just have random sentences that are popping up, or like random paragraphs, and I'll write this ugly phrasing into my notes app. Like it'll just be like this random, almost like an essay in itself, with just like a lot of what are these called? Dashes? What are they?
Forward slash.
Yeah. When I can't decide on a word. Like sometimes I'll have like 7 synonyms for a word because I'll just be trying to write as fast as I can and get it down. And then that will almost be like zero draft, and then the first draft will be putting that into an actual Word document and editing through. Other times, especially more for public creative stuff, it's sitting a little bit more down and writing a bit calmer. Yeah, it definitely fluctuates. I know a lot of people who write and it's like their first draft is quite specific, and then it takes them a really, really long time to write that first draft because they're almost, when they've finished and they go back to edit, it doesn't need that much editing. I'm happy to go through 6 drafts.
Yeah.
Like I'm happy just to get it down before I lose my thought. Writing that first draft when you have the kind of energy to do it is stressful because I'm like, I'm about to forget the sentence I was just thinking, which is the best sentence I've ever come up with in the whole entire world. Like, make sure I get that down. But then also the next one, like, it's a strange kind of meta process where I'm aware of my own brain thinking about it. Yeah. It's like there's 2 versions of myself in my head, or 2 voices trying to write, and also being aware that I'm trying to write and reminding myself to write faster. So I'm like, you're actually not, I don't know if you're helping right now.
How cathartic do you find just that expression alone of just dumping everything, your thoughts down, and giving tangibility and life to what's going on in your head?
It's a relief, especially once I feel like that spewing stage is kind of ceased a little bit. It's good to be like, okay, it's all there. I'm not going to forget it. That then triggers the next phase, which is I can sit through and sift a bit more and shuffle it all around. And I really enjoyed that phase because there's a bit more calmness to it. That first step feels so urgent. It almost feels dangerous. Like it feels like it's all going to slip away. And I get to the second stage. There's still a sense of like really wanting to complete it, but it's not the quite level of risk.
Do you visualize much when you write?
And visualize what kind of, in what way?
I guess just like not even the words, but just are you able to then translate your thoughts into, I guess, even just like imagery?
Yeah, I think because I am interested in that screenwriting / visual component, a lot of the ways I write is visualizing what either the character's doing or what the scenery looks like, how the dialogue kind of feels. It flip-flops between all those different realms though, because then like in the writing sense, when it's like strictly prose, there's a lot more, like the emotion really relies on being conveyed through word choice, as opposed to like this like basic action, which is when, if you were going to have it as a screenplay or a play, the director or the actor could then interpret that, and put their own sort of, like, bring it to life in a different way.
Yeah, there are parallels between between your creative process and mine as a designer as well.
Yeah.
So, when you just have that big first initial burst of inspiration, you just got all these things going on in your head, get it down. So when my process of getting it down would be to then rummage through Google or Pinterest and try to find visual representations of what is going on in my head and collate it and organize it. Actually, it was just more the collating part first, that brain dump. And then for you is then just starting to refine it. That would be the process of then organizing it. But do you find that in that process alone, that it is where you find the meat of it? Like, what I mean by that is that when I first start and I dump the idea down, or trying to, I think I know what it is that I want to achieve, but that is a carrot that's being dangled in front of me to take me somewhere else.
Yeah.
So as much as I'm going towards this, and I'm thinking that I'm now actively creating something that's going to look like that idea is just there to take me there. Does that work the same with writing? It
will depend on the piece. Sometimes I will have this just almost fully formed story. Like I do that really dramatic first non-draft draft, and then it's very similar to the way it finishes. Like by the second draft, it's pretty similar, like
Yeah.
it's the same. Other times it'll be exactly like what you were just saying, and I'll write it down and it'll be a lot more fragmented, and they'll just sort of be instinctive, like there's story here and what am I trying to say. So maybe some fun pieces of dialogue that I'm like, I really want to incorporate in here, or imagery, I'm like, I can't get this out, like I really feel like the piece is built around that. And then when I get into that, taking the notes app note into a document and then getting it all out, I'm like, oh, I'm actually going somewhere else now. But I can mold it. Like it really, to me, is often I think of it as clay, the sort of cliche of having clay and of molding it, and of like through those drafts, you know, those people use it, their clay, like they have little scrapers off, like just continually scraping and just trying to find the exact, like the sharpest outline of the story that it can possibly be, just through repetition of reading and just scaling it back and trying to distill it to its very essence.
I suppose, especially if you're going to be writing fiction and creating characters, right? Like they probably wouldn't be fully fleshed out until you get into it, and then you start to familiarize yourself with who they are and what they're actually there for, right?
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
that will be that carrot. It's like, I want them to eventually get to this point, but then along their own kind of journey, they end up over here, and then it just has all this knock-on effects to what the story actually is all about.
Definitely. And that's why I struggle to answer your questions, because in my head, I'm trying to answer in like every different type of writing I do. Like, oh, essay, like this is what I would do for essay fiction. But if we're narrowing down to fiction, then absolutely. There's some writers who really plan and have it all set out, and they have their characters and they have their motivations and their values and the way they speak, etc., etc. I often will have the characters, but in terms of where that story is going, we sort of, to be cheesy, learn together, the fictional characters and I. Like I will write them, and then on the refining journey be like, yeah, it actually makes more sense for you to behave this way. Like the way you've sort of, you want this character is calling out to be described as, and like it actually makes it more consistent if you were to be the one who does this instead of another one, that kind of thing.
Even with your non-fiction, the pieces that you're writing by Saraid Taylor, they're also really inquisitive. You know, by nature, like you're not really out there to say that this is the way things are. Like they are. You write as a way of trying to discover something. So it's just, even in that process alone, that it is about, where's this going to go?
I don't think it's in my nature to be aggressive. So therefore I like to be assertive and I like to challenge, but always in a generous way, a compassionate way. A lot of anything I do, I really try to come down to empathy. So when I'm writing, like I don't mind a bit of tongue in cheek, but I definitely want it to be more a conversation, and I'm very prepared to be wrong as opposed to be dogmatic about it. And I find with my writing, yes, as you say, it's a lot of, well, is this the way it is? Like, this is what it seems to me. Is this how are we all agreeing this is the way it is? This is the way it should be? Like, it's those kind of sort of phrasing that I think is curiosity about the world helps anyone.
So then you go out there, you write a piece that is there to challenge thought and to challenge ideas and just to propose a different line of thinking. And then you'll be met with pushback, right? Like, it's not even a way of them challenging your challenge, but just basically just dismissing the idea of it entirely.
Yeah.
Right? Like, then that, how does that then affect what you're trying to create?
I think humour is really, really important. And I think if you're not sort of having fun, then it's going to be a sad old life. So when there are sort of criticisms, and sometimes not even criticisms, they're just blatant dislike comments, just insults, I would be lying if I didn't say initially when you read it, you go, oh my goodness, ouch. But then I really do try and work out a way to like be amused by it and then bring that amusement to my audience. So then I sort of spin those comments into the story. People who are sitting there spewing hatred aren't people who I want to be, and I don't want people I want to be associated with. So as much as I initially have that reaction of like, oh, that stings a little bit, ultimately I'm pretty comfortable if they don't like it, because someone who's using their time to write a really, really mean thing on the internet is not my kind of audience. Like, I could give or take if you read my work or not. You're not who I'm interested in engaging with. I'm happy to write for the people that, even if they disagree, which is so fine, I'm happy for disagreement. It's in a way that there's still some integrity in it. There's still some kindness.
It's funny though, how they come across your work, disagree with it so strongly that they're willing just to throw shit at you. It's like this, either just take it or leave it as what it is.
Yeah.
With some artists, we've that's the thing about putting yourself out in the public sphere, how you're open to criticism. But traditionally, art hasn't been showcased on social media like it has been in the last, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Where art was something that was just in a gallery, hanging up on walls, being viewed by people who actively went out and wanted to see it. So there is those that, if you're not into it, you're not going to go, right? So there wasn't that kind of criticism. There was going to be, if you get to a certain level, then there will be people that are going to be challenging the essence behind your work. But you're inviting that. You want that anyway. You want to be challenged as a person. But now it seems as though that the only way that you can put your work out there to the people that you want to is to also put it out there to the people that adamantly don't want it. Yeah. So it's hard to kind of find who your people are, and you know, you don't know whether or not that it's a reflection on you, your work, or it's just something that we're just going to have to get used to.
It's funny. It's funny because you're exactly right. The people that don't even necessarily want to read it or want to engage still engage. Like, they still choose to. It's mystifying to me and to many people, I think, who use social media as a tool more for either amusement or entertainment or to build community or find connection, etc. There are some people who genuinely use it, like their enjoyment and their entertainment is being mean, which again, mystifying. If that's what you want to do with your time, that is more than fine. I think that's why when it comes down to like artists sort of supporting each other and either in person or on social media in whatever forum, that's when it takes the pain out of it a little bit, because you have your community and you know, like in terms of what your values are and the integrity that you want to have as an artist. There are other people out there. Everyone's not Fruit Loops. Sometimes I think the loudest people on the internet are the Fruit Loops, and that's when social media can become such a labyrinth of pain and silliness. But otherwise, if you can,
I just try to oh man, you know, they got to live with themselves. Right?
Literally that. Absolutely.
It must be painful.
It must. Yeah. Yes. Like, come from a place of pity and generosity. Like, good luck. Like, I hope you have a better day. Some of the best comments I think I've seen people respond to them is like, good gracious. Like, I hope you find happiness. Yeah. Like, I hope somebody gives you a hug. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, you know, like, get well soon.
Yeah.
All the best to you.
Yeah.
On the way here, every time I'm recording, I take that book with me, right? It's the Rick Rubin book, the Creative Act, and I'll just there's always a little nugget in there, a little bit of wisdom that I find that just resonates with me at a particular time. I don't know. He's just got a way with his words. So speaking of that, there was a passage that he wrote about how he makes up words, right? Because he can't necessarily find the word that he is looking for. So he'll make up a word that sounds like how he feels.
Wow.
Right. And I've thought about this because back to branding, I was reading up about phonetics and coming up with brand names and how there are certain sounds that elicit different feelings and emotions. And I wondered, like, how restrictive is writing based on the limitations of a language where you can't necessarily, I don't want to say you can't freely express yourself, because you can, but it's just there are nuances in it where, like, what stuck with me was that, like, in the English language, we only have one word for love.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are other words. There are other languages where they're able to identify and disseminate all the different types of love, the different forms of that level of affection you have with, you know, your romantic partner, with your friends, with your mum, with your siblings. But we don't delineate that, right? And I wondered whether or not how much of that kind of makes its way into culture as well, right? Like if we're not able to then identify and understand, even on an emotional level, how to distinguish this from that, then how does that work here?
I could not agree more. I read a really interesting essay about a really similar thing. It's like you can't, like you don't think about something that hasn't been given a thought to, like that doesn't have a definition. Like you might be able to sort of feel it, but it's very hard to articulate something that isn't able to be articulated because there's no words for it. So it absolutely makes sense that our culture is built around the words we already use, and it's quite restrictive in that sense. There's a lot of dialogue around different forms of love and how much we prioritize romantic love, and because there isn't necessarily any other explanation or like validation around other expressions of love. Like I think that is
I think so.
Fascinating
I
topic.
think that and you know, to play into the whole cultural paradigm part of that, I've wondered whether or not being able to articulate or distinguish the different types of love, how that has played into how men would want to express themselves freely, right?
Yeah.
Like a guy telling his friend, "I love you, bro."
Yeah.
Right? Like that is crossing. That's a threshold.
Yeah.
There. And there'll be so many people that would feel that but won't say it because of just the connotations of what that word, how it could be interpreted.
Yeah.
You know, that was just an example I just thought of. But how much the language that we use influences how we interact as society.
Yeah, it is. It's, I think, a really big challenge because there are certain connotations to certain words that are the only version of that word because no other word, like no other versions exist. So it does like limit our, I think, ability to connect with each other on a certain level. And then also it's an accessibility question, an education question as well. Like literature, historically, or often at least, falls into the most educated people's hands, whereas it should be for absolutely everybody. And like our understanding of education probably should be expanded while we're at it as well. I think that's a challenge that I find, being able to be as specific as I can when I'm writing and use a word that for me connotes exactly what I'm trying to say, but then also still be accessible to wider audiences. Because I think as a society, we don't all, like in Western society, or at least in Australia, we don't really use that many words. Like I was already a dork by saying, oh, my synonyms. Like I love my synonyms. I love variation in language. I think as Australians, we often like go back to certain words. And then so when you're writing something and you're trying to bring across a certain feeling, if people don't understand it, then it's not doing its job. That's why there's a difference probably between visual mediums as well. A lot of the time that's a bit more accessible.
So there's the written form, and like every other form of or artistic pursuit, it is a form of communication.
Yeah.
But it just seems that the written form is far more explicit.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're giving words, and these words have inherent values and definitions, which should be universal, but not necessarily either, because there is nuance in that, and context obviously matters as well. So there's the way that, you know, when you write, you're trying to articulate a sentiment that is very personal, and to be able to then accurately bring all that together, put it in words, which is a limiting factor, and then expect the other person on the receiving end to understand exactly what it is that you're saying. What you're feeling. I guess that's the challenge.
It's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge, yeah.
So by Saraid Taylor,
Yes.
Substack.
Yes. / all the best now, apparently.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Where can people connect with you, find your work
Yeah.
on the internet?
Thank you. Probably, oh golly, that's the other thing. I feel like there's just so many different platforms. Like I have a website. You can find it through the website. You can find it through Substack itself. You can find it through Instagram. It's all just my name.
If you just search Saraid
Search
Taylor,
that, yeah.
it'll come up.
Spell it correctly though, please. Thanks, Mum and Dad, giving me a name like Saraid Taylor.
At least you can own it as well, right? Like it's your name.
Yeah. But anything through that, I'd love to connect with anybody that wants to connect. Come and chat to me. I definitely will be continuing to post and get a little bit more consistent with it. The conversation is inspiring, Wayne. So we'll see how we go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Good luck with all your work.